Before we move on from testing, our producer Kate Lamble has been talking about testing with us pretty much every week this series. She now sleeps by counting tiny swabs jumping over fences. Hello, Kate.
Hi, Tim. The big news this week is that on Tuesday, the chair of the UK Statistics Authority, Sir David Norgrove, wrote again to the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, to say that...
Ooh, can I read this one? It is a sizzler.
Go on then.
OK, yes. Sir David Norgrove, UK Statistical Supremo, writes to Matt Hancock, and I quote, "I warmly welcome, of course, your support for the Code of Practice for Statistics, but the testing statistics still fall well short of its expectations. It is not surprising that given their inadequacy, data on testing are so widely criticised and often mistrusted." Ouch. Maybe he's been listening to More or Less?
I hope so. Sir David added that the aim seems to be to show the largest possible number of tests, even at the expense of understanding.
That's a real punch in the nose, isn't it? Well, in the meantime, the government has set themselves a new testing target to hit by the end of May. Kate, remind us what it was?
Well, on May the 6th, a week after the government claimed they'd achieved their last target of carrying out 100,000 tests a day, that's the one they achieved by starting to count postal tests on the day they were sent out rather than completed and returned, the Labour leader Keir Starmer asked Boris Johnson why the testing figures had dipped under 100,000 almost every day since. The Prime Minister replied with this.
Actually, I think that the Right Honourable Gentleman was right last week when he paid tribute to the amazing work of the NHS, the logistics team, everybody involved in getting up from 2,000 tests a day in March to 120,000 by the end of April. And yes, he's right that capacity currently exceeds demand. We're working on that. We're running at about 100,000 a day. But the ambition clearly is to get up to 200,000 a day by the end of this month, and then to go even higher.
Many newspapers initially reported that the government had promised to carry out 200,000 tests a day by the end of May, but it was soon announced that the Prime Minister had actually been talking about testing capacity.
But Kate, capacity isn't what actually happens, is it? This show has a capacity for 10 million listeners, I guess, but it doesn't mean we're getting them.
Not yet, anyway. And I mean, I had the capacity to wake up at 6 this morning, go for a 5-mile run, and then spend an hour learning a new language, but I didn't do it. Health Secretary Matt Hancock has said he's measuring capacity by asking laboratories how many tests they can process per day. It wasn't until the 27th of May, 4 days before Boris Johnson's target had to be met, that a section appeared on the government website showing what they believed the testing capacity to be. At the time, it was 161,000. That's just over 40,000 more than the number of tests which they said were carried out that day, which, remember, includes tests put in the post, tests for research purposes, and multiple types of tests done on the same person. Then, on the 30th of May, 1 day before the deadline, Matt Hancock announced they'd reached the target, something they say is true for every day since.
That's very sudden, so what changed?
That day, the government declared that it had acquired the capacity to do 40,000 daily tests of a new type. These are antibody tests. And those tests, remember, are meant to identify not whether someone has the virus, but whether someone has had it in the past. Having claimed this extra capacity of 40,000, the government also claimed that it had hit the testing capacity target.
OK, although that does sound like meeting your Apple target by claiming that oranges count. How many of these tests did they actually carry out?
Well, none. The government has never used a single unit of this new testing capacity of 40,000.
So this is less like saying we have the capacity for 10 million listeners and more like saying we have the capacity to get 10 million viewers for our new TV show, which doesn't exist.
Exactly.
And all this is possibly why Boris Johnson told the liaison committee that while he has set a new target to make sure all tests are processed within 24 hours, he's been forbidden from publicly announcing any more deadlines. I wonder who has the clout to forbid the Prime Minister from announcing policy targets. And then there's this other question of how many people are being tested. At the time of our recording on Tuesday afternoon, that information had been missing from government statistics for 10 days.
Yeah, you might recall that while the government was often claiming to have carried out more than 100,000 tests a day, it was typically only testing around 50,000 people a day, which was very confusing and suggests that the same person would often be tested several times on the same day, and that being counted as multiple tests, unless the whole dataset is just noise. In any case, the Department of Health and Social Care say that reporting on the number of people tested has been temporarily paused to ensure consistent reporting. They say that there are a few cases where the same person has been tested more than once at drive-in centres or with a home test, and they're trying to correct this.
Well, more than a few cases, it seems to us. Any idea how long it will take them to clarify their figures?
No, they've given no indication as to how long this might take.
Well, thank you, Kate. You are listening to More or Less.